T-minus boom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're live with three special guests tonight. My partner, Leah Shaper, is to the left or to the right, however this is manifested, and an expert on, God knows, so many bizarre things, Russian and communist military and foreign policy. He's an independent journalist that is loved by many and hated by few, but they're out there. Jeffrey Nyquist. And the last time we had you on the show, Jeff, I was taken aback for a number of reasons. First, after we got done, and then we had conversations before and after, it was amazing. We were like soulmates. And just the amount of information, esoteric information you knew, was blowing my mind. So tonight we're going to talk about all things esoteric, and I'll set the stage in just a minute. But first, let's say hello, Jeffrey Nyquist. How the heck are you?
I'm doing great. It's nice to be here.
Leah, how you doing over there?
I'm great, thanks.
Okay, and so last time we talked a little about what's going on over in Russia and Ukraine, and I'm sure people are sick and tired of being sick and tired of hearing about that. And so tonight I wanted to just branch off a little bit into the esoteric here, and in fact we have here the screen showing the mysterious case of Parallel 33. I don't know if people out there have heard about this, but we're going to start off here with Jesus. Did you know that Jesus Christ was 33 years old at his death? The number 33 is also the most important degree that Freemasonry gives. That make up the human spine. The human foot has 33 joints. The Amen, or Amen as we use it in religion, is the numerical equivalent of 33 if you use numerology. And here we're looking at an excellent representation of the 33rd parallel on Earth, where if you just take a quick look, it cuts across some very important regions. And some authors have linked the location to certain structures on the parallel. So, and also alien activity. So if we take a look at the northern hemisphere of the planet, the parallel 33 happens to run across a few important cities in the United States, including Dallas, LA, Phoenix, the town of Roswell, which is a hotspot for UFO phenomenon. Phoenix is, in fact, where the mass UFO sighting took place, known as the Phoenix Lights. Some people argue that the military fired anti-aircraft rounds, but I do digress. But did you also know that John F. Kennedy was assassinated on the 33rd parallel? Some have gone so far as to suggest Parallel 33 was specifically chosen for his assassination. But Robert Kennedy was also assassinated on the 33rd parallel in the Ambassador Hotel in LA. Furthermore, Jesus Christ predicted his own death at Caesarea in Philippi in the vicinity of the 33rd parallel. The first nuclear weapon was detonated in Alamogordo, New Mexico, on the 33rd parallel, where the first annual Squatterman 2022 conference is going to be held on the 33rd parallel. And did you know that it was the 33rd president of the United States that targeted two Japanese cities, both located on the 33rd parallel with nuclear bombs? And we can go on and on. Parallel 33 acts as a junction of the Tigris and the Euphrates, the ancient city of Damascus. In the book of Enoch, Mount Hermon, guess where that is? On the 33rd parallel. What the is going on? What's going on here? Jeff?
Well, there are meanings above the empirical meanings of things, meanings of numbers and meanings of places and times. There's a spiritual side to everything. And the idea that this world, everything is just understood in sort of a prosaic way is not true. There's always a larger, deeper meanings, like coincidences. You look at this now, are these synchronicities? Or is there other dimensionalities being connected here on this 33-degree parallel?
Leah?
It would be interesting to see, let's say you picked another number. Let's say you picked 22, right? And to see what kinds of coincidences or synchronicities, depending on what you want to call it, came up for those. I mean, because one of the things that I struggle with personally with numerology is understanding what the meaning is of any particular number. Like somebody just told me the other day, a spiritual teacher of mine, that I should throw out 27 things for 9 days. And I said, well, why 27? And she said, honestly, I don't know.
I can tell, by the way, I can tell you why.
Oh, well, I'd love to hear it.
I know this. This is so weird that I know this. This is weird.
There are no coincidences.
I don't.
That's why we're here.
Look, when I was years ago, this is in 1981. By the way, 81 is 8 plus 1 equals 9, and 27 is 2 plus 7 equals 9.
Right.
I was living in apartment 72, which is 7 plus 2 equals 9. And I had a dream. And the dream was about the Holy Grail. And the voice in the dream said, to know the meaning of the Holy Grail, look for the number 9 wherever you can find them, and then you will know. And then it said the year 1981, and then the 1 and the 9 fell away, is equal to 9. And then I saw the 8 and the 1 plus, and then a 9. And so I worked for, at the time, I worked for a recreation company, and I had it was a skating rink, and my key in the skating rink was 252, the key number. I thought, that's weird. And then I started thinking, wait a minute. In the Bible, the 144,000 chosen of God, 1 plus 4 plus 4 is 9. And the book of Revelation is the 27th book of the Bible. That's a 9. And then the beast, 666, that's 18, and 1 and 8 is 9, right? And then I found that the woman that flees, the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation, the woman that's going to give birth to the man-child who flees into the desert, she flees for 342 days. That's 9, right? So it's all over. And then what does Christ say in the book of Revelation? I am the Alpha and the Omega that is and was and is to come. So then I pick up Occidental Mythology by that famous guy that did the series on PBS. He was a Jungian. And it was, I find out that the Feast of the Seculum that Augustus Caesar celebrated to renew the world was celebrated on June the 3rd, 6-3, which he had a chorus of 27 girls and 27 boys, all whose parents, 54, were alive. And they sacrificed 9 he-goats and 9 she-goats, right? And then I find out, and then in German mythology, you have the 9 Valkyrie who come to the battlefield to take the dead to Valhalla, which has 540 gates. 5 and 4 is 9. No, it doesn't stop there. I'm just, not to bore you, but it goes on and on. So look for 9s wherever. So 9, how many months is a woman pregnant? 9.
Yeah.
What is the last number before you start counting over? It's 9. 9, and then you go back to 0. 9, 10, 19, 20, 29, 30. It's the Alpha and the Omega. And the 9th planet is named after Pluto, the god of death and rebirth. There you go. Now you know.
And also, here we are looking at the 33rd parallel, which is 3 times 3 is 9.
That's
I'll also just throw it out there
you got it there. Yeah.
9 has also been my favorite number for my entire life for reasons that are unknown to me. It was just something that my brain picked out at some point. And you sort of alluded to this already, that it's in a way, it's the number of completion, because it's when you start counting over again.
Yeah, it's the number of the regeneration of the world.
Well, here's what's weird. My an old a boyhood friend of mine. Well, it was my young adult friend in my early adult years. He always he said 9 all the time. 9, 9, 9. And that means no. Also.
Yes, that's right. Auf Deutsch, it means 9. Yes.
Yeah. So, du hast ein kleines Schniederwutzen? 9. Let's segue into here. So you and I, Jeff, after our last interview, where you went into a diatribe about other numerological coincidences.
Yes.
And so how did you come about that, and why?
Well, I had accidentally, when I was very young, there was this intriguing bookstore in Laguna Beach. I went to UC Irvine when I was a senior. I used to drive down when I'd get free of class and go down to Laguna Beach because it's a really nice place to go, right? But there was this bookstore there called Red Lion Books. It's been long out of business. I got a number of books here from that bookstore. It was an occult bookstore. and it had very bizarre things like Dr. D's, manuscripts about the Enochian language. It had all kinds of, I found this little book in there called Practical Time Travel, right? And it was written by Colin Bennett. You could buy that book now on Amazon. And I thought, that is so bizarre, I have to own it because it's so bizarre. So I got it, I brought it home, and I thought, I didn't read it. It's really thin, and I was bored, and it was winter break, and so I read it. And and I was already using self-hypnosis because when I would do really complicated math in college, I would get insomnia. I couldn't sleep. Your brain is just going from the math problems, and they would, for some reason, they made people who were studying political science do a lot of math. I think they still do, maybe not, but they really did for me. And so this girl in my class said, well, why don't you get self-hypnosis in 2 days? It's a book. And I got it and I learned it and I used it. And it worked. I slept better. I thought, wow, thank goodness. Well, this little book, Practical Time Travel, was just use the self-hypnosis and you could see the future. And I thought, oh, yeah, right. So I tried it. And this was sometime in February of 1981 when I started this experiment. This is how I got involved in these experiments and had all these dreams about numbers and everything else. It's how I got going in it. And of course, I said, very cynically, I want to see a front page story in advance before it happens, the biggest news story. It can't be something I have to hunt for. They told you had to be really precise. You do the self-hypnosis before you go to bed. You give yourself the auto-suggestion. You fall asleep, you have the dream. Well, I did. I dreamt that.
Segue.
Yeah.
Segue.
Yeah.
When you started talking about this after we already did an hour and we did another talking for 2 hours, and you brought this up, I was like, Jesus Christ, I got to get this guy. So I was like, no, you know what? I'll smoke a little cannabis. I got some time, and then listen to him. And dude, you blew my mind. So I think that the audience listening now, that's a pretty good segue into you finishing this story.
Right. Well, okay. So I have the dream. I do it on a Wednesday night, and Thursday morning I wake up and I had the dream that the new president, Ronald Reagan, gets shot in the chest, and he sort of got his hand up like this, and he's starting to not smile like in the famous videos of him. And I see that exact thing, bullet in the chest. Yeah, exactly. And of course, I'm thinking, wow. So I even tell my friends the next day. I go to lunch with my bunch of my college buddies. I say, I dreamt that Ronald Reagan got shot in the chest. And of course, they didn't like him. So one of my friends said, oh, did he die? I said, I don't know. It could be fatal. I don't know. I have no idea. Next Monday, Hinckley shoots Reagan in the chest.
Boom.
And I'm stunned. I'm like, oh no, this can't have happened. This is too weird. And I'm thinking, how is the universe constructed so that this is even possible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, so I kept doing the self-hypnosis and I kept having very different dream experiences until I had what one person, I know a guy who died and was dead for about an hour. They kept him very cool to revive him. And he's one of the few people in the world. And I described my experience to him, and he said, you had a near-death experience. I said, but I didn't die. I eventually started having these dreams where you see what death is like. And then what I saw in that is I'm not supposed to see that. Right?
Yeah, well,
and then,
Jeff, let me back up because this is a collaboration, albeit this is a role play. Nothing we say here is actually factual, or do any of us believe in this?
Right, exactly.
But let me get to the point that was most moving for me is that when you went back to, let's say, 3, 4, maybe 5 of the people that you had revealed the dream to, almost no one remembered. Nobody remembered. Did anyone remember?
Afterwards, I told, when the news first came across the radio that that there was a shooting around him, I was at my mom's house. I was doing laundry. I was using her machines. And I turned to her, we heard it come over the radio, and they didn't know he was shot at first. And I said, Mom, I dreamt this. He's going to be shot in the chest. You watch. And it came out that way. Mm-hmm. And, but she didn't remember afterwards. And my buddies that I went to lunch with, they didn't remember it, that I had told them.
Right. And you and I talked about that, and we thought that that was the glitch in the matrix, where somehow if you have this ability to astral travel or to affect the past or the future and even interact with people that are involved in the event that
Yeah,
you have prior knowledge to, that they will not be able to
they
remember
will
it
not
because
remember it.
it
No,
will affect the fabric.
it
So everyone
that
just plays dumb. They're like, you told me
right.
that? That's
Yeah.
funny. Yeah.
And that was very disturbing to me
Yeah.
because, I knew what had happened and I wanted somebody to validate it with someone else and I couldn't.
Well,
Huh.
that's good news, in my opinion. You can't hack the matrix. So
Yes,
whatever's happening is moving forward, and we can't hack it.
that's
We
right.
can we can
And
see it, or we can go back and look at it, or we can go forward and look at it, but
you
we
know,
can't really alter it. And that to me is kind of comforting.
well, I struggled with it for many years. In fact, I dropped, within a year of these experiences, I dropped the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was just getting too crazy and too spooky, the experiences I was having. And I said, I got to study something real. I
So
can't be
Leah,
lost in this stuff, because you
you
can be
look
lost in it.
salivating. What's your thoughts?
I'm just, I am kind of salivating. It's a good way of putting it. So I have been doing a lot of reading about near-death experiences, and I'm putting that in quotes because usually the people have actually died. It's not a near-death experience; it's an
Right.
actual death experience. And I've also been reading quite a lot about young children, usually under the age of 5 or so, who remember previous lives. And I was talking with Diamond about this quite a bit recently, and at one point, especially with the children remembering past lives, I was equating that as to being a glitch of sorts, because it almost seems as if they're not really supposed to remember. Because typically, what happens is as they get older, they
Yes.
start forgetting that previous life.
Right.
And it's only in the case, where these things have been really well documented that, we have the records and we can sort of look back and verify all of the things that they've reported about their previous life that can be, verified now. But it almost does seem like a glitch. But it's interesting to me in all of those cases, it does sort of seem like an accident, like
Mhm.
as if someone wasn't necessarily supposed to have access to the realm, let's say, in between lives. But I've never read about anybody other than the children who forget their experiences as they get older. I don't recall anyone else being told something and then they don't remember it later. So that's really interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
there's
And
also
it's also interesting because we're talking about one specific timeline. Like out of infinite possibilities, there
yes.
was the timeline where Ronald Reagan gets shot. And so that's interesting as well.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's
I don't know.
very disturbing.
No,
I
I think
don't know.
that Jeff, it's explainable because in the whatever this linear 3D realm of time that we're experiencing, it's constrained in only one's experience, human's experience. So if this human is able to tap into a fourth or a fifth dimension of experience with that time, and we can see into the future or the
Yeah.
past, I don't think we can bring it in here and tell everyone because
Well,
it
that's one. Yeah,
would be
yeah.
catastrophic, wouldn't it?
That was one of the things that I saw in my final sort of visions. It just to sort of go into detail, this experience, these self hypnosis. I started doing it in February of 1981, and I did it sort of through much of 1981. And the last dream in that series was March of '82, and it got much crazier, and a lot more things came through, and it's like, this is really crazy. I wanted to understand the experience. After I had 3 times in 1 week, I woke up and somebody's voice was shouting loudly. And as I woke up, I realized I was sitting up in bed and it was my voice. I was shouting. And I was shouting because what I was seeing everything all at once. It was like
Mm.
omniscience. And I was shouting out what I was seeing, and I woke myself up. And then I felt this tingling on the top of my head, and it went right down my spine and out, and it was gone.
Hmm.
It happened 3 times. I held it the longest, the third time, and I got stuff like everything's going to be okay. I kind of got this is what death is. This is you have when you're dead, you know more, right? It makes sense. There's There's no hell as we understand, as people conventionally think of it. It's not what you think of. Everybody is saved in the end. God saves everyone, so to speak. And that the human history is like a glorious procession, and that it seems quite horrible as we go through it, but it really will end up all for the good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, you could have found the ticket to the races the next week and become a millionaire. Why didn't you remember that? But
Well,
you're in a different state.
I find it fascinating because you use the word procession, and we speak of the cosmic clock on the channel. That's a geologic clock that causes a huge catastrophe here on our planet, which erases the memory of previous high societies.
Mm.
But the facts that I know in past life regressions and experiences, and speaking with you intimately, Jeff, and other people, that people like you and I that are tapping these realms have had past lives that are more recent than 12,900 years ago. Several of
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
several
Well,
of them.
and
It
this is the
seems
thing.
like you're like almost immediately recycled upon death.
Yeah. Well, I don't know I wanted to know if it was real. The one thing that was real was this experience I had 3 times. It was so real that you just, once you have contact with that, you want it again. It is so intense. It's so beautiful. It's so amazing. You want that consciousness back. And I was a psychology minor. I had friends in the psychology department. I said, "Do you know a good hypnotist?" I wanted to find out what this experience was. I wanted to get somebody to, and this friend, he hooked me up with a guy in the LA area. I went to him. He was a Jungian psychologist, and he did hypnotize me. Now, I had among these dreams, I had the experience of being other people, a soldier that died in World War II, a preacher in New England in the 19th century, 18th century, a German artisan of some kind, right? So I had these, and it's like I wasn't Cleopatra or anything. I was just an ordinary person. But they were so vivid. And I thought, is this real? Is my imagination making it up? How would I validate this?
Yeah.
And I wanted to get some kind of validation. And it was he actually hypnotized me, and I experienced my death on a battlefield. And it was so horrifying that I was not myself for 3 days. It shook me to my core. And I don't want to ever have that experience again or go through that kind of hypnosis again. And I don't even know, is that validation or not? I have no idea. I mean, I'm an objective scientific person. So, and this is how deep it ends up going, when you get into this stuff.
There are definitely numerous cases of people doing past life regression through hypnosis, and recording the session and being able to verify details later. I mean, obviously, you need to be within a certain time frame, that previous life, so that you can actually find some records. But it definitely does happen, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I have had a lifelong interest in it ever since, trying to figure out what was real and what isn't. And of course, it's I was raised in a very strict Christian home, and the Christian theology is that you live once, and this really casts doubt on that. It really does, that there is something more here that our theology is not encompassed. And of course, it turned out to explain a lot my experiences in my life. So, which is, you get into all kinds of personal things and things that happen to you, and you go, "Oh my gosh, I understand this differently now." And you
Yeah.
can't help having these kind of insights after these kind of experiences. You just can't help it.
Yeah, indeed. And this is where I think we could dive even deeper, because what Leah has shared with me about these unique childhood near-death experiences, that these kids all of a sudden manifest all this information. Some of them are so specific, like she said, that they actually research back to the base, and they find out that these people in 1800s or whatever actually existed to the exact it's so specific that the child manifesting these I guess their images or whatever the information is more specific than the people around that person knew. And when they go research deeper, they find out that the exact relatives of the deceased didn't even know what the child knew. That's how mind-boggling it is.
Wow, it is. Yeah, I know that the University of Virginia has a lot of these records of toddlers recalling past lives that they have been able to I think it's over 1,000 cases they've been able to validate, which is rather astonishing. Since the late 60s, I think, when they first got into the subject, there's been a lot of documentation. I think we're maybe only at the beginning of really researching this to see what's in it. And
it's like leftover innate DNA. It's like etheric information. It's like the Akashic record still in the DNA that hasn't been rewritten. And then as the child ages, Leah, how old is it? Like by the time they're 3, they don't know.
I think it's 5 or 6.
No,
the age of
no,
5
yeah,
or 6.
it's usually around like 5 or 6, but sometimes it seems like it's even as late as 8. But it goes even beyond just memories and details. Like in some cases, I read Diamond a story about a child. I think this was in Thailand, who it was noticed when he was very young that he had these weird birthmarks.
Scars.
Like he had I think it was like one on the front of his head and one on the back. And then later he starts coming up with all of this detail about a past life, and his death was getting shot in the head. And then when they looked again at his birthmarks would match the wound pattern from him getting shot in the head in the previous life. I think it was that he was shot through the back of the head. So the back of the head was like a nice clean circle, and the front of the head was like a messy mark, like exactly what you would expect from a gunshot wound. And there's numerous documented cases of things like this, of child's birthmarks matching the wounds that they received typically through death in the previous life, which is astonishing. And then I've also, after reading all of this stuff, I sort of realized that this must happen a lot more than we recognize, and it's probably often just shrugged off as, oh, that's just a child talking.
Right.
But clearly that's not the case at all. And I'll just throw out there too, the book that I've been reading is called Surviving Death. It's written by a journalist named Leslie Kean, Kean. And she does a very thorough analysis of all of the stories that she's recounting, but also she goes through a lot of the previous research that's been done on all of this stuff. Really fascinating and really well-researched book.
Yeah, I've read that book. That one really was well done. But what in terms of what it all means, like the near-death experience, this, you talk about people who are dead. This guy, he called me. We used to talk, and he called me after he recovered from, it took him 3 years. He ended up with epilepsy after his near-death experience. And he wouldn't talk about it. And so I talked about my experience, these visions I had, and he said that is exactly what he experienced, that I had described the same thing, only I didn't die. I had it through this weird, it was the effect of the self-hypnosis. And I think that a lot of the mystics in history, they've had these kinds of experiences, and it opens you up to things, to sort of higher wisdom. But the problem is we're anchored in this material time-space realm, and we don't translate the wisdom of that other realm very well into language. Our language is time bound, and it's bound to this material existence. And so we end up creating theologies and doctrines about these mystical experiences that end up separating us from the reality of the experience and creating something artificial that sort of, we become idolaters of our own constructions.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm going to take a deep dive here, and then we're going to talk aliens. I've done some very high dose mushrooms experiences with myself, pre-planned, because I have experience in that realm. And I have different types of species that have been given to me by shamanic people, or, special mushrooms. And I go in there looking for answers. So you have a process. It's a process that's been handed down, and it has to do with the human species. But when you use these medicines, you can tap the same near-death type experience channel. And when almost everyone that goes into these realms, when you go look at their experience and what they say, it's all the same thing. Now, from my personal experience, it's kind of hysterical, because when I've gone in there looking for answers about topics on near-death experience, or what is God, or why are we here, the answer is always everything will be okay.
Yes.
You're going to be
Yes.
fine.
Hey, Bach.
There's no purpose except love, love and help. It's like they don't know how. There is no language. They're trying to tell you, but there's not much to tell you. There's no
Well,
purpose.
it sounds trite. It sounds like some trite thing, right? But when you experience it, it's not trite. It's profound.
It's completely profound.
Right.
And you come out and you're like, there is no purpose except to love people, and everything is going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You got it. That's it.
I have been of the opinion for a long time that really, let's say the purpose of having this experience, of having a lifetime in the 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, is simply to learn and evolve and grow. Like each of us came here, we picked a specific time, we picked our parents, we picked our astrological sign, and we picked all of these things because there were specific things that, as beings, as whatever you want to call it, light beings or whatever it is, that we felt like we needed to learn. And so here we are. And then when we go back, it's all okay. Everything's fine.
Well, I would,
and even that's even true if you're a murderer.
Right. Well, I would challenge the idea of evolution, because outside of time, all is one and nothing evolves. Everything is. So and that's the thing.
And or ever was, because
right,
infinite,
eternity. Right.
There's nothing that we're talking about that's unique.
And when I look at something complex, you look at the complexities of Egyptian mythology or Christian theology, right? And it's like, wait a minute, this is really profound. Christianity, Christ, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Christ is truth. So what do they do with the truth? They crucify him. Mm-hmm. So what always happens again and again in history? What do they say? We're going into a war now, and truth is the first casualty of war. Yeah. Right. So we crucify the truth all the time, and that is sort of our damnation. And it's like, and so pick up your cross means what? Pick up your cross means stand for the truth, no matter what the consequences are. Stand for what's right. And what it turns out to be, if you start to understand it metallogically, spiritually, truly spiritually, it turns out to be incredibly profound. But if you get bound into the words, then it's idolatry of some particular formula of words rather than the meaning of the words, the actual experience, spiritual experience that the words are referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's the sad thing about religion, in my opinion. And, but I don't want to bash religion. I mean, I think religion,
right. No, absolutely not. I mean, look,
millions and millions of people.
I mean,
but
look,
there's
profound.
Another step.
Right. Yeah. No, it's profound. And so what I'm saying is that people misunderstand their own faiths. They don't. Here it is. It's actually laid out all for them. If they only understood the real meaning of the words, instead of being attached to the words being arranged in a certain order. It's like when I was a kid, when I watched Lassie when I was a kid, it was a big show when I was a kid on TV, and I wanted my dog to watch Lassie with me. And so I would point at the TV screen. My dog would be sitting there and like, look, there's Lassie. And my dog would look at my finger. He would never look at the screen, and it's not my finger. Look at but he wouldn't. He would just look at, what are you doing with your finger? What is that? And I think a lot of people, they end up looking at the finger and they don't see what the finger's pointing to.
Yeah, I think it's often missed that religion is just a framework for understanding something. It's not the truth. It's just a representation of the truth. And you have to look at it that way and look beyond it.
Well, and when I was introduced to Micah Dank, he's an esoteric author in fiction, but he writes an astrotheological fiction based on fact. So that it's kind of Dan Brownish. So when you're reading it, it's based on historical facts, but it upsets a lot of people because he has a skill. He's gone so deep in astrotheology that he can literally read any ancient historical book and interpret it astrotheologically, and people that are reading it as the word, like the Bible, that think that this verse means that. Well, when he reads it, it means that the sun rises in Libra, that the grapes happen, and then people make wine. That's all it means. It doesn't mean what the words say. And I find that fascinating, because I don't think the Bible is in any way literal, based on all the information on Bible code that I've seen in the last 3 decades. I've been researching Bible code since it was first discovered. And then you can add numerology, and with the astrotheological aspect, where you can read almost 80% of the Bible and it's simply astrology being described using words, people can get quickly lost.
Yeah, I had to force people not to talk about religion on my site, because they would start doing these things, and I would say, look, I finally said, look, this stuff is metaphorical. And no, there's nothing metaphorical in the Bible. It's all literal. And I go, oh, so a woman spoke to a snake and the snake spoke back, right? This is real. It's not a metaphor, right? It's obviously a metaphor. Come on, let's get real. So it's people are they get really dumb when it's really a beautiful, powerful story, and it's incredibly enlightening. The book of Genesis, if you know how to read it. But if you want to say a snake literally talked to a woman, it's like, no, you don't get it. And you're too dumb to even go here. Look, go back to worshiping trees. You were better.
Right. Leah, do you have anything to add before we get to Ezekiel and the wheel?
Yeah, it's just making me think about another book that I read recently. A woman named Julie Davis. She's a medical intuitive and a psychic, and she has a number of books that I've only read one of hers, and it's a very simple book called Angelic Attendants. She has an ability to see what's going on when somebody's dying, and she describes this process, a multi-stage process. And part of what she sees are actually angels attending the situation, but she's very forthright in explaining that what she's seeing is very much a product of how she thinks, which has to do with the fact that she has a Catholic upbringing, right? So when she sees angels, she's seeing these tall beings with long blonde hair and wings, and it's this very classic imagery, but she fully acknowledges that this is just a function of what she already knew, and the way she was already trained to think religiously, and that it isn't necessarily that way, that it's probably entirely metaphorical, and somebody else who has the same abilities that she does would probably see it differently.
Oh, you're touching something. David knows this about me. My dad is in the next room over here. He's been dying for 14 weeks.
Oh,
and we've had experiences, and I don't know if I shared this with David or not, but early on in the process, my dad, one morning, he says to me, "Do you hear them?"
Yeah.
And I say, "No." And he says, "Bob Lito." And I said, "Well, who's that?" He says, "Well, that's who I've been talking to." And I go, "Where did you meet him?" And he goes, "I met him right here." And so I asked my mom, do you know Bob Lito? And I asked, does he live in the neighborhood? Did we miss this guy somehow? No, nobody knew who Bob Lito was. My niece looks him up. He's a Lawrence Welk singer who sings about crossing over. My niece sends me this video of him singing about crossing over to the promised land. Okay. He's the guy, he sings these old Negro spirituals. And so now this gets weird. Now, the month of January and February, my dad sort of kind of recovered, and he wasn't seeing his invisible friend anymore. And so all of a sudden, one morning, my mom was with him, and he was doing this in bed. She says, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Which way do I turn now, Bob? Which way do I turn?" "Okay, I turn here." And he's going on, and he wouldn't answer her. And finally, he says to her, "Oh, Bob and I, we're driving to the promised land."
Yep.
And he's talked to his grandfathers. He's talked to his dad. I've been there when one of his grandfathers entered the room. I couldn't see a thing. The other night he was talking to somebody, and I come in, and he goes, "Oh, Jeffrey's here." And he said it more than once. Jeffrey's here, and he's just looking at somebody, and it's like I look there, and it's like there's nobody there,
Yeah.
right? And this has gone on for a long time. And the hospice nurse says she's seen this many times.
Yeah.
And she said he will start grabbing in the air at things, and sure enough, he did. He was like interacting with his hands also.
Yeah. So what we've proven here is that there's definite abilities, and I think Leah and I have talked about this at the age of birth, as you get up to 8, the leftover abilities, and then they reemerge maybe during Alzheimer's or other brain diseases that allow you to tap into some of those suppressed realms. And so, but I want to also bring in now this is a great segue. I want to bring in alien abduction, because Leah was talking about how different people and personality types may perceive these entities different ways. Because you have a Roman Catholic upbringing, you're going to see the angels with wings and everything's going to be fabulous. Maybe you're some demonic person who was beaten all his life and grew up in a cage. You're going to see demons, perhaps. But the one thing that everyone sees that's the same is the gray alien, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we can go back to Aleister Crowley, and it's a pretty similar site. And we're looking right now at Nam, which is the manifestation of his woken dreams, Aleister Crowley. And after this fact, I'm sure all of the people that saw the gray aliens or were abducted by aliens did not know about Aleister Crowley and this picture. I mean, it's almost nobody knows about it.
This is a homunculus, by the way, that Aleister Crowley and a German woman in New York, in some apartment off of Central Park in early 1918, conjured up. They spent weeks using sex magic to conjure this homunculus, and this is the drawing of it.
Now, sex magic, from what I understand, is in every religion. It goes back almost to the younger Dryas. I mean, it's in the Mahabharata and goes past that. And it's the ability of and it even includes the Christ consciousness. And this is the use of the orgasm or the non-production of the orgasm to create this type of connection to other dimensions or become a godlike person. And what you do is you approach orgasm the more you do it and not get to that point, the more you can tap into this kundalini. And so that's how I understand the sex magic. Do you have another understanding, Mr. Nyquist?
No, that's my understanding. It's something, when you produce a child, it is not, a mere physical act. Right. Because we are not just physical beings, we're also spiritual beings. So it's also a spiritual act. So they are doing something with this to create a spiritual connection and to generate some kind of power with it.
All right. So, and then we get to the gray alien. What's going on?
That is really bizarre, because this is before the whole, 1918 is long before you had people talking about gray aliens, although, you have, again, the leprechauns, the tuntas in Scandinavia, the little men, the homunculi. I mean, they've been around for thousands of years. And, what are they? What are they really?
What are your thoughts, Leah?
I was just wondering, do we know that this homunculus is actually gray?
Well, according to what I can remember, the descriptions are vague, but it's certainly not a very healthy looking creature. Nam was more of a bulbous, clammy thing, like everyone describes the grays. The only difference is Nam had thin slits for eyes, when the gray aliens have these gigantic eyes with the gigantic bulbous eyes. But that could all be coming out from, cartoons and modern propaganda infiltrating just like you said, Leah, that people change their perception based on the information that comes on the television, which is all propaganda.
Well, I'm equating it more with what I was just talking about with Julie Davis, seeing those angels the way that she sees them, because that's the image that she already had in her head. Yeah. Not necessarily so much because it's being fed by, I guess it's the same thing, really, being fed by the outside world, by a religion. And then what's this thing on his chest?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Jeff, do you know what that is?
No, I was wondering the same thing. I never heard anybody suggest it. What I have heard is that it's dangerous to kind of meditate on this picture too long. I've heard that people who have meditated on this picture have had abduction experiences afterwards.
Oh dear.
Yeah. But I think, the human mind is suggestible and it's
Oh,
funny.
let's get rid of that.
And yeah, and so I don't know. It's you go back to John A. Keel's works, right? What is behind the UFO? He talks about the intelligent electromagnetic spectrum. You've got the whole question of what is demonic phenomena. You know, how do we understand it? What is it? What purpose does it serve? Why does it exist at all? You know,
Yeah.
and then you go back to a lot of ancient writings, and you go back to ancient Sumeria. Look, there is, I think we talked about this before. I found online in the 1840s, they were digging through Azurbanipal, the Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal's library in the ruins of Nineveh, right? That's where Jonah went to warn the people after the fish spit him up on the beach. Nineveh was inevitably destroyed by Babylon and the Persians, and anyway, in that ruins of that library, they found this. It's the summoning of the 7 wicked spirits, and it's about a 27-minute read, right? And I tried to read through it, and it was just too damaging, I would say. I felt the evil. I started to feel the evil as I was reading it. And I said, I cannot read this anymore. This has got some kind of power to it. And so I left off. But there's some kind of, it's a ritual. You get together with a bunch of these other people and you read this out loud. And I don't know if you do a magic circle or what the ancient method was, but the one thing I found in my research was that across the street from Ashurbanipal's library was the House of Exorcisms. They were digging through those ruins. It's like, oh, good. They had the emergency room across the street. Right.
Now, my friend, and everyone knows him that's watching this podcast, probably Rex Bear from Leak Project. He's been married for decades with his wife from high school. And at one point in their life, about, let's say 10 years or so ago, I think it was about, they acquired a book right when he started doing his research into conspiracy theories and aliens. And they acquired this book from someone that says, you have to have this book. And they gave them this book. It was like a satanic book of rituals or whatever.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
He looked through it or whatever, and it was interesting, and he put it on his bookshelf. Well, for the next 30 days, everything went dark and everything went bad. And Rex's whole life crumbled. And about at the end of the month, I think I don't know if I'm recalling the story right, but he went to his wife and he said, and she was like, and he said he was about to tell her something, and she's like, Rex, the house seems evil. For the last month, it seems evil, and I think there's spirits in here, and it's horrible. And so he got freaked out, and he didn't say a word. And he just nodded or whatever. He said, oh, I'm sorry, what can I do? Whatever. He went down, he took the book, and he got rid of it far away. I don't know what he did. He burned it, some ritual. But as soon as he got home, it was light again. Wow. And everything was different. And he didn't even know, he doesn't even remember what the book was, but it's gone. And there is definite truth to that.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't, even Aleister Crowley, as into this occult stuff that he was, in his writings, he calls people who play with this, who don't know what they're doing, fools, idiots, clowns. You don't do that. When he heard that Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard had tried to summon his lamb, this homunculus that he had created, when he heard they had tried it, he had nothing but absolute words for them. They were idiots. They were complete imbeciles. What could they possibly possess them to do something so dangerous? Yeah. He said it was dangerous. His stuff is dangerous, no doubt about it. And in fact, there's an account that Carl Jung was asked after Roswell and whatever happened there, and who knows what that was. They got Jung to come to lecture before the military, And he said, this is something goes back to ancient Babylonia. If you don't get if you don't get ahead of this, it's going to destroy civilization and maybe even mankind. He said that's how dangerous this was. And he's telling this to generals and Pentagon bosses and they were like, is this guy, has he got his feet on the ground? But I think Jung was warning him, and I think Jung was a person that knew, and Jung was very concerned with this towards the end of his life. He wrote a book, very important book, very difficult to understand book called, it was subtitled The Phenomenology of Self. He called it Aeon, right? Is the name of the book. Very famous book, really trippy book. I read it once, did not understand it, read it twice, maybe a little, 3 times, and I'm going, okay, this is starting to come into focus. It's really difficult. And it's all about the enantiodromia, which is the unification of opposites, and it's all about the regeneration of the world, the alpha and the omega. And Jung is trying to puzzle it out, and Jung is very afraid that a coming nuclear war is part of this. And of course, here we are, we're standing at the brink of the door now.
I was just thinking a minute ago, like, is the World Economic Forum, are they using black magic? Is that what's going on here?
I hope not. But no, but really, seriously, no. Yeah. I mean, Jung was telling them.
We know that this is true, so let's not even bullshit it. We know that Baphomet, we know secret societies, and even if it's just Masonic, but like, the secret groves of the elites, Epstein Island, and then Epstein's connection through WEF and through all of that nonsense. There is something nefarious going on at a very deep level.
And then you have the fact that all the Masonic organizations in Europe, somebody in Italy had gathered massive intelligence on them before World War II. It was being collected in Italy. And of course, you guys probably know who Julius Evola was. Julius Evola. The esotericist and philosopher, the Italian. He was hired by the SS to get those records of the Masonic lodges, because guess what? The Nazis wanted to know what the Masons were up to. They wanted a list of all the Masonic lodges, names, business front organizations, everything. They compiled it, and when the Allies invaded Europe, Evola went to Vienna, and they moved all the records to Vienna. Well, at the end of the war, guess who captured all that intelligence data? The Soviets captured it. Now, I'll tell you something about another esotericist, a Crowleyist, famous Alexander Dugin, who is a primary advisor to Vladimir Putin. Dugin was a Crowleyist. I knew a Russian guy who knew him years ago in the 80s, and they kind of had a conflict, but he said Dugin was into Aleister Crowley. And Dugin's father was concerned about him. He was like an aerospace engineer of some kind, working for a Soviet, a defense company in the 80s. And his dad said, my son is just completely absorbed in the occult. What should we do? The KGB said, oh, we'll take care of it. We'll recruit him. It'll be easy. So they went to Dugin and they said, Alexander, we want to have a talk with you, and he says, I don't like the Soviet Union. I don't want to hear about Marxism, Leninism. He says, oh, you'll want to hear what we have to say. You're interested in the occult, right? He said, if you work for us, we'll show you. We have records on every occult organization in the world and what they're up to and what the real truth about the occult is. And you will have full access to those records if you work for us.
Wow.
And that's basically in Dugin, in the biography of Dugin. I forget the guy who wrote it, but it's very interesting stuff. So you got to realize that this is a very old subject, and everybody who's in the great game is aware of it. They're aware of it.
It really gives me pause. I mean, Diamond and I have talked at length many times over about cosmic catastrophes and all of the knowledge that we lose every time we have a global catastrophe of some sort. But also that there's this commitment to telling history in a linear fashion, which is just a bunch of BS. Clearly, history is cyclical, and the form and practice of the universe is cyclical, and the same kinds of things keep happening over and over again, but the information gets buried every time we have some kind of cosmic catastrophe. I'm thinking right now about Göbekli Tepe was clearly buried on purpose. And I don't know, I'm now thinking that it has a lot to do with this black, and I'll say white magic as well, because I sort of feel like the rest of us are sort of fighting this with white magic. I mean, it just gives another dimension to that, I think.
Yeah,
Well, yeah. Well, you talk about that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say this all, I think, relates to the Yuga, and we can wrap up on that. The Yuga cycle was explained in the Mahabharata and many other Far Eastern texts in India as having effects on the human species in their psychic abilities. It's like from the golden age to the silver age to the dark age. And then the Romans and other cultures, the Greeks, had their own interpretation of this cycle. I think we're entering in the illumination of humanity currently. And at the same time, catastrophes do occur. So it doesn't matter what you build on as we move forward in the clock cycle, which is a circle. It's not linear. And the whole idea, and I know this for a fact, because as a child, we were taught that like farming began 5,000 years ago. Right now, we know that farming was in full effect 9,000 years ago. So you just got to keep looking, and then farming will be in full effect 12,000 years ago. And then, oh my God, 12,900 years ago, the whole world was destroyed. So that if farming happened 15,000 years ago, that's gone. I mean, it's just like, wake up.
Yeah, well, you get to Hamlet's Mill, and it again, I hate to say this, the processional numbers, and Leah was talking about 27. Well, there they are again.
Yeah.
There they are again.
Well, we have to keep destroying it all so that we can learn it all over again.
Well, there is this, yes. And the thing is, you don't repeat the 6th grade. Now, again, I don't believe in evolution, but we're in a time, in a universe of time. And so you got the Big Bang, right? And everything, the universe comes up, it expands, it contracts, it expands and contracts. You've got the theory, Nietzsche talked about it, of eternal recurrence, right? So in what sense is eternal recurrence true? Possibly.
Yeah, I don't think there's a Big Bang, and the most of the evidence is there is no Big Bang, that this experience that we're in, this universe, is potentially infinite in a way that our math or even our brains biologically don't understand. It's so ancient that like people like Leah and Jeff Nyquist and I have been here for 100 trillion years, recycling through the stars in this process. And now we're on this planet Earth, recycling through these biological entities. But the one thing that is true to many people that I know that are dear to me, that have been brought together for some reason, and it's not nefarious. This is due to the cosmic effects of the universe and the fact that we're awakened and we're making moves in our own lives, manifesting our own destiny, is an image I'm about to show you here. It is the Mantis image. And I don't know if you've ever seen an image like this, Jeff, but when I was 3, 4, and 5, when I was being abused from my parents, these creatures were protecting me on the side of my crib. They were also outside of my doorway. And many people who I now live next to that are friends of mine, and I don't have a large list of friends, have all encountered these same exact beings. And interestingly enough, a week ago, I was reading some McKenna work, and when they did an experiment in 1971 with high doses of psilocybin in the South American jungle, they almost went insane. And Dennis McKenna did go insane for about a decade until he came to. And he's now one of the biggest proponents for psychedelic medicine to heal people. Him and his brother both saw these same entities circling in a spaceship around planet Earth as the protectors of our species. And those connections blow my mind, because it's exactly what I saw. It's exactly what they saw. And we were children. And how can you explain something like that? I didn't look at the comic books of these creatures. I knew nothing about praying mantises when I was 5 years old. And so how are all these, I mean, and that's, I think, my part to add to this. What could this possibly mean?
We don't know. It's just like Charles Hoy Fort said, something owns this earth, all others warned off. We are property. I mean, we don't know what the earth is or what the human race is in the terms of the larger universe. We don't know what this is here. And we're not given to know. It's like it's not our place. And the mystery of it, we are supposed to live. One thing is clear: we're supposed to live our lives. We're supposed to live by the truth. We're supposed to find the truth. And it's like, it's almost like a test. This life is kind of like a test. And it's almost like this, it's like a school, even though in the afterlife, in eternity, everything is all known, like Socrates suggested. We already know it all. But this is still, it's a test in this world. And there's something about living here in the material world that's like food for the spirit. There's something we get here from this kind of existence, something that we need, that the other side of our existence, the spiritual side, it gets from it.
Well, I feel like we got that tonight. Leah?
Yeah, I mean, along the lines of what Jeff is talking about, when I was in college, I studied philosophy of science and physics, but I got there because I was wanting to create a major marrying Eastern philosophy and physics. I ended up not doing that and going with this philosophy of science thing. Backtrack a little bit more. And when I was in high school, I was in this special program and I did this whole research paper kind of talking about exactly this idea that, in the spirit realm, everything there is no separation. I mean, we still have our individual consciousnesses in some way or another, but everything is unified and together. Because there is no space and no time, there is no separation. It's like literally space and time is the thing that gives us contrast so that we can actually see that, moving from point A to point B does this, and the separation of time gives us that contrast. All of that contrast, it gives us ones and zeros. It gives us black and white. And those are all of the tools by which we're learning in this realm. The question I have is why do we need to come here to learn this stuff? That's the part I feel like I don't know the answer to.
Well, I think you just answered it. I mean, you have to have contrast and difference in space and time to have meaning.
Yeah.
Because you can't form meanings without it. If you have an eternity of everything being a unity, you could say that everything then, it's like the famous Gilbert and Sullivan song, if everybody's somebody, then no one's anybody. Right?
How
If everything
is
is all there is and nothing is all there
Could
is.
you imagine when you die, you don't have to Google anything because you know everything?
It's boring. Yeah.
But that's the great irony, right? I mean, because I have this sense like, okay, so like you said, Jeff, that is where the meaning is. But at the same time, I don't think that meaning goes away once you're in the eternal. I think it's still there. And that's the paradox of all of this.
I think it builds up. And I think that is a paradox because there's an interaction between this world and the next. There is a definite relationship and an interaction. And you see, in that world, everything is transmitted into metaphor and meta logic. In this world, there's the literalness of things, the empiricism of it. And so you've got the overlap of the two worlds. Yeah. And I think people who think, oh, there's only matter, there's only things, there's only numbers, they miss that other world. And the people that think that there's only that other world, they miss the fact that this world has significance.
Wow.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a fantastic show, mind-blowing. We went from A to B to Z, and we ended on the Mantis. Now, Jeff, have you ever seen anyone or talked to anyone that has seen the Mantis creatures?
Yes, I did. Gosh, how long ago was it? It was almost 30 years ago.
Okay.
I met a man in LA who was having experiences with these creatures.
As an adult?
As an adult, and his wife had been abducted, and she was pregnant. And it was crazy stories. You know, the stories that you hear from
Yeah.
UFO abductees. And he said, look, there's a graveyard in Pasadena that is owned by blonde aliens.
And those would be the Nordics.
The Nordics, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and he says, you don't believe me. I know you don't believe me. Go to this place. And I thought, so my
Okay.
business partner and I, we went down there. At the time I was doing contracting work and we had a day off. And I said, let's just go down there to this place and see what it is. We went down there. It was just a funeral home. But there was the only one weird thing happened. This black cat came up to me and wouldn't leave me alone and followed me around the whole time we were there. And my partner was getting really nervous. Why is that black cat attached itself to you? What is with the cat? You know,
It's clearly it's clearly an alien Nordic.
a familiar, you know, and it's like, it was weird. And then we thought, we can't make heads or tail of this guy, must be crazy. And so we left. But the only weird thing was the cat. That was it.
Okay. All right. Well, it's kind of a bummer to end the show
Yeah.
on.
It's a black cat. That's all there is. Sorry.
All right. So there is more to this world than black cats and more endings. There's mantis people. And we just proved it to you tonight. So final words on where we're going with this conversation. Let's pick it up and let's talk about what's happening in Ukraine in about 2 weeks, Jeff. How does that sound?
If it's all still there, yeah, we could still talk about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Leah, thank you for coming on the show. What are your final thoughts?
This has just been a wonderful conversation. I mean, I love jumping from esoteric point to esoteric point. Beautiful. It was a pleasure to speak with you, Jeff.
Thank you. It was great fun for me too.
All right. We'll talk to you all soon. And that was definitely a boom.